3 Habits Holding Your Reading Speed Back. Slideshow. There is no such thing as a bad reader, just those with bad reading habits. So once you know what habits are holding your reading speed back, it's a lot easier to read faster. Now the problem is information overload. Reason is many of us in this room haven't had a class called reading since we were 12. Yet every other subject such as maths and science has progressively gotten harder. Yet we're forced to keep up with this information overload with the reading skills of a 12-year-old. But first, let's take a look at those bad habits. Bad habit number 1, subvocalization. Subvocalization is that little voice in your head that you use from time to time when you read. From a young age, many of us are taught to read aloud, and as we progress we then read inside our heads. Studies have shown the average talking speed is 250 words per minute. So it's no surprise that the average reading speed is between 200 and 250 words per minute. So the average untrained reader can only read as fast as they can talk. So if we want to read faster, we must start to see the words as opposed to hear them. And we do this already. Picture this, when you see a stop sign, the words stop are clearly printed. We don't read the word stop aloud, we understand the meaning of the word, therefore we only see it. How do we reduce subvocalization? We need to distract our brain by using small distractions. Tip number 1. Press the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth. For 2 reasons. This will stop you mouthing the words as you're reading, and it will also create a small distraction for your brain, not so large that it will take your mind away from the focus. Tip number 2. Your environment. Your environment is key. Have you ever noticed when you walk into a coffee shop that sometimes you see people working, and it's not because of the good caffeine, it's because coffee shops have learned to create an environment which is optimum for productivity. The environment is not too loud where you get distracted what's going on around you, nor too quiet where your brain begins to wander. The key is to get the brain into a state of relaxation, whether that's listen to music without lyrics such as classical music, or studying in a spot which is consistent and personable to you. The key is consistency. Bad habit number 2, regression. Now by a show of hands, who in here's got to the end of a page and forgot what you just read, or even worse, the end of a sentence, myself included? And naturally we go back to the top of the page hoping this time somehow the information goes in, but to know that. The reason is because the author often has to give context. So by the time our eyes have reached the key points, we're exhausted. Picture this. You're watching a movie and you're couple scenes in and it doesn't quite make sense. Almost like you've missed a couple key scenes. And then suddenly it clicks, it all makes sense and you understand why the movie was set out the way it was. The reason for this is not a lack of understanding but more so a lapse of concentration. Tip number 1, one way we can improve our concentration is by becoming an active reader. When our brain wanders, it's because we've become passive. What's one of the most common questions children ask is why? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? We need to be curious. To find a good answer, we must have good questions. So while reading, have good general questions at the front of your mind, such as how long will this take for me to read this? What am I looking for? And what key figures and words do I need to find? Tip number 2, gliding. Foot gliding. You will need to use an object such as a credit card or any piece of object that you can use to cover up the sentence you just read. Now the great thing about gliding is it removes your safety net to reread the sentence you just read. Meaning, you've got to pay attention to the sentence you're reading, because you know there's no way you can go back. Bad habit number 3, fixations. Fixations of where your eyes are still on the page. Now on average, an untrained reader uses between 10 to 15 fixations per line as their eyes bounce from word to word. Read this sentence for me, just take your time. There's no rush, I'm not testing you. improve the number of fixations you make. The first tip is use a pacer. You can either use your hand or your pen to underline the sentence as you are reading. Now this is set to the average readings of 250 words per minute. And the great thing about the pacer is two things. 1, it maintains a reading speed. Often when we read we don't realize how fast or slow we're reading until it's too late. And number 2, it increases and encourages our eyes to read faster, because we're forced to read on accelerated rate. Tip number 2, bouncing. Now for bouncing, you'll need to segment your page into 3 columns. A word of caution, please make sure it's your book before you start drawing in it. Don't do what I did with a library book that was 50 years old, because it will cost you £200 to replace. An expensive lesson, one that I have learned from. Now once you've made the 3 columns, you want to bounce your eyes in the middle word in the first column over to the second one and over to the third one, using your peripheral vision to read either words either side. So there we have it, the 3 habits holding your reading speed back. But it's important to distinguish between reading for need and reading for enjoyment.